is Narada Muni Das. Today I'll be giving a talk and presentation on material problems and spiritual solutions. So for those who have come here for the first time, we always start and we end our talks with what's called kirtan. It's a form of mantra meditation. And so not only do we do mantra meditation separately on what's called japamala or necklace beads, we also do meditation in groups together. So it's kind of like fanning the spark with more fans. So I'll start. First, of course, I think this is something we can relate to at all times. We're all experiencing difficulties in the material world, whether we like it or not, and whether we want to escape from them or not. So the basis of things is to start really digging deep and thinking about what is going on actually here. As human beings, we have that ability to question what is actually going on. So first I wanted to start by reading this nice, just a 3-paragraph essay that someone wrote. It's called The Paradox of Our Time. So I'm not sure, can you all read that? Is that too small? I apologize for the inconvenience. But if it's too small, welcome. Hare Krishna. So I'll just start reading this. We have taller buildings, but shorter tempers. Wider freeways, but narrower viewpoints. We spend more, but have less. We buy more, but enjoy it less. We have bigger houses and smaller families, more conveniences, yet less time. We have more degrees, but less sense, more knowledge, but less judgment. More experts, yet more problems. We have more gadgets, but less satisfaction. More medicine, yet less wellness. We take more vitamins, but see fewer results. We drink too much, smoke too much, spend too recklessly, laugh too little, drive too fast, get too angry quickly, stay up too late, get up too tired, read too seldom, watch TV too much, and pray too seldom. We have multiplied our possessions but reduced our values. We fly in faster planes to arrive there quicker, to do less and return sooner. We sign more contracts only to realize fewer profits. We talk too much, love too seldom, and lie too often. We've learned how to make a living, but not a life. We've added years to life, not life to years. We've been all the way to the moon and back, but have trouble crossing the street to meet the new neighbor. We've conquered outer space, but not inner space. We've done larger things, but not better things. We've cleaned up the air, but polluted the soul. We've split the atom, but not our prejudice. We write more, but learn less. Plan more, but accomplish less. We make faster planes, but longer lines. We learned to rush, but not to wait. We have more weapons, but less peace. Higher incomes, but lower morals. More parties, but less fun. More food, but less appeasement. More acquaintances, but fewer friends. More effort, but less success. We build more computers to hold more information to produce more copies than ever, but have less communication. Yeah. Yeah. Drive smaller cars that have bigger problems. Build larger factories that produce less. We've become long on quantity, but short on quality. These are the times of fast foods and slow digestion, tall men but short character, steep in profits but shallow relationships. These are the times of world peace but domestic warfare, more leisure and less fun, higher postage but slower mail, more kinds of food but less nutrition. These are the days of 2 incomes but more divorces. These are the times of fancier houses but broken homes. These are the days of quick trips, disposable diapers, cartridge living, throwaway morality, one-night stands, overweight bodies, and pills that do everything from cheer to prevent, quiet, or kill. It is a time when there is much in the show window and nothing in the stockroom. Indeed, these are the times. Maybe I should just stop the talk there. That would be boring. So, as we see here, there's a lot of paradoxes in the way that we're living our life. And especially in this modern time, we have a lot of conundrums that we're trying to figure out. So whatever we're doing, problems are existing everywhere, no matter where we go. So the nature of things is that we're trying to figure out what is actually going on and how can I fix these issues. And why aren't these issues being solved by so-called experts that are meant to solve the issues? So, there's three Sanskrit terms. So what I'm going to do today is put three of these terms and kind of categorize different problems that we experience in modern society, and what modern society has tried to do, and why modern society actually isn't sufficient in solving these problems. Hence the title, Material Problems and Spiritual Solutions. So the first type of problem is called Adhyatmika Klesha. So klesha in Sanskrit kind of means like poison, or something that's not good for you. So Adhyatmika Klesha is a problem experienced within the mind and the body. So disease, sickness, illness, mental illness, right? Especially being so prevalent nowadays. And we'll discuss that in a little bit. So the next is called Adibhautika Klesha, which is problems inflicted upon the self by other living entities. Whose favorite animal is a mosquito? Yeah, I thought not. So we're continuously experiencing these things from all the different kinds of living entities. And the last is Adidaivika Klesha, which is problems inflicted upon the self, us, by nature. So natural disasters, hurricanes, tsunamis, tornadoes, you name it. So as I said, modern solutions are not actually totally efficient in solving these problems. The question is why. This is something that I think we can all think about and ponder throughout this entire presentation. But the main idea is that actually this nature of trying to solve things in the same consciousness that we created the problems in is kind of like running with one foot nailed down. So we have to actually work to try and look at things in a different perspective. Too many times we're operating in the same consciousness to try and fix that same problem. So first I'm going to talk about Adhyatmika Klesha, which is the problems inflicted upon the self, the mind, and the body, within our own mind and body. And these are just some statistics. So if we see just in alone, there's been nearly 10 million deaths from cancer alone. There's been over, just from all different kinds of cancers, and lung cancer specifically, 1.8 billion. That stems from smoking, from air pollution, you name it, so many different kinds of things. And over 1 billion people are suffering from obesity. 9.1 million deaths attributed to cardiovascular disease, and over 100,000 drug overdoses in 2021 in the US alone. So we see in our physical health, we're always experiencing issues. Even if we're maintaining our body nicely. I knew someone a couple months ago. He was 27. He was just graduating from Harvard Law School. He was running Ironmans. Incredibly fit person. And all of a sudden, he was running an Ironman and he just collapsed and died. So all these crazy things, it's like, whoa, okay, what's going on? Like, how can we actually get about these problems? And so we'll talk a little bit about the solutions in a second after we get to mental health. So I think nowadays we're all much more familiar with mental health. I think even since this COVID time, things have become a lot more prevalent. Especially people have kind of been locked in their homes. They haven't been getting so much personal interaction. Me personally, coming from a psychology background, I'm really anxious and worried about, especially the children that grew up in this time. How does that impact their psyche? So this was in 2021, and statistics showed that 57.8 million Americans have some form of mental illness. And 1.7 adults attempted suicide in 2021. You have social media, you have all these things. People they can't seem to, so many of us struggle trying to find meaning in life due to the way that we've been conditioned and taught. So what are modern society's shortcomings in trying to fix these issues? We have so many experts, as what they were saying, we have more experts, but more problems. So this culture of materialism and gratifying our senses actually has a lot to do with not only physical health, but our mental health. Especially the way that we're raised in our public education. Of course, there are teachers out there that have been big inspirations for us. At least I did have inspiring teachers when I grew up. But the general structure of our education is that it actually fails to help us think independently. So the nature of the human mind and the nature of us as the soul operating in this human body is that we have the capability to ask questions. We have the capability to actually inquire, use our own intelligence to navigate through whatever system we're trying to work in. And nowadays we've kind of been molded and conditioned in a way to not really be taught how to think, but what to think. And this leads into a lot of being molded into what society expects of us to do. And a lot of times you hear, get a job, make money, have a family then you'll be satisfied. But that doesn't make sense, because some of the people that have the nicest families, the biggest houses, the nicest jobs, they're still not satisfied. So you see so many trends in the media. Media is beating you down with so many different things, whether it's about what to be fearful about, or sad news all the time, or a specific trend. I mean, I remember a couple years ago there was I don't know if you know what Tide Pods are. There was a trend where people would eat Tide Pods, laundry detergent. It was just a trend that was created, and so many people got sick from it. So many people, just because they've been so conditioned to be fixed on the media aspect, desiring these types of gratifications materially, or worship in some sense. And that leads to so much mental health and also physical health problems. We have overeating, right? We have so many fast food restaurants, but the ingredients are terrible. So what's the point of even going there? It's a sign of convenience, of trends, of trying to mold ourselves into these ways of living, but it's not actually constructive for us. So we also see that we have broken health systems. So unfortunately, solving symptoms doesn't actually heal a root cause of something. So we can start with mental health, for example. In psychiatry, a lot of times pills nowadays are being heavily overprescribed. There's been a large issue with these things going on. And so people become reliant on actually taking the pills and taking these things away because it's getting rid of their symptoms. But eventually it stops working because the root cause isn't addressed. So a cured patient is actually a lost customer. And if we see there's actually a lot of corrupt ties within different forms of pharmaceutical companies or hospitals, or certain doctors. Not that all of them are bad, of course not. But the main structure of that nowadays is how it's going. And also we see that in terms of physical health, there's not really good ties. You see here, this is a lot of conflicts of interest. If you look at the American Heart Association, these are actually sponsors and funders that fund these programs. And if we see here, I can name off a few that I know. There's Tyson Chicken Nuggets, there's Subway, there's PepsiCo, there's Mars Candy Bars, which is like a huge candy bar. Huge candy. If anyone knows Snickers or Milky Way, that's Mars. There's Purdue Chicken, massive, one of the biggest chicken producers in the country. Nestle, Texas Beef, so many more companies. And you look up here too, we have the American Diabetes Association, American Cancer Society, Susan G. Komen Foundation, also being funded by so many foods that are extremely processed and not actually healthy. So you see this continuous push and pull between what is people wanting to do and then a desire for some materialistic gain. So unfortunately, these companies that are trying to solve problems, unfortunately, are getting tied in with the wrong things. I brought this example of Purdue Pharma. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with this, but Purdue Pharma I won't get too much into it because I want to move on to the next slide. But Purdue Pharma is the company that produced OxyContin. And so this was a time when they were coming out with more pain medications to help people. More science was coming out about it. And they actually tampered the results of their studies. And they showed that these drugs weren't addictive. And so billions of dollars were made off giving people these OxyContin pills, saying that it'll relieve your pain, and it's incredible, it'll make you feel nice, and they're not addictive, so you can take it as much as you like. And actually, this is what sparked the opiate epidemic. That is what's happening today. So these are just simple things that we can analyze and study and see that, okay, well, these people are saying that they're helping and saying that there's things, but there's other motives, there's other material ideas that are going on. So how can we rely on them to actually solve these issues that are occurring in our life? It's very difficult. So now we have adibodhika klesha. So, as we said, no one likes having mosquitoes as their favorite animal. It's just tedious. Shark attacks, ticks, bed bugs, you name it. So these are things that are happening to us at all times. And actually, we can tie back into the hospital aspect of things and getting medications, and that helps, of course. But there's really not much we can do. We have bug spray, and even the bug spray nowadays that we have on the shelves is actually bad for our skin. So there's not much we can actually do about these things. So I wanted to tie in more to the human-to-human conflicts that are inflicted by other humans, which are really, really important and often ignored. So if we see, first of all, we have political and religious conflicts. I mean, anyone who studies history can see that this is dated back hundreds and thousands of years. Religious wars, political wars, right? This is my boundary and this is my land and it belongs to me. And if you try to take it from me, then there's going to be problems. Or this is my only way of belief and this is going to be the issue. If you step in my boundary and you disagree with what I'm saying, then there's going to be big issues. So this also actually comes into leading to violence and terrorism. If we see when sectarian beliefs, as I say here, become radicalized and pushed to the edge, then people actually, first of all, they lose their intelligence. People become angry and they forget things. There's a saying, you've been clouded by anger. So people become very attached to their view of reality and their idea of what their view of reality is the only absolute truth. And so these things continuously occur and violence and terrorism occur, and we've seen it so often. So this also leads into my next topic, which talks about modern slavery. Nowadays, there's been a lot of talk about slavery that's been happening in the past, and I think that's very important to acknowledge. Um, but unfortunately, there's actually many, many more slaves nowadays, unfortunately. Forced labor, marriages, human trafficking, 50 million. And who knows how well that number is. And terrible, terrible things that are going on that humans are inflicting on each other, simply on the basis of identification of the body and some type of greed, some type of motive. So if we see here in modern society's shortcomings, this terrorism and violence we have sectarianism, as I was talking about, and also violent consumption. So we don't really think about that as much when we're watching TV shows, watching movies, listening to certain types of songs and music, eating certain types of foods. There's actually violent consumption in all those types of things. So the more that we're consuming that type of media and food, for example, so many animals get sent to slaughterhouses and tortured, and people are consuming that. And people are watching shows about war and conflict and negativity. They're watching the news and it's all bad things. I don't know if anyone has noticed that, but a lot of the times the news is really good at making you scared. Really good at doing that. So the nature of things is also like a divide and conquer type of thing. If you and I are fighting over our specific philosophies or our specific way of life, then we can't actually work to have a form of communication. We can't actually, because we're both clouded by our own idea of what's right. Our centers are different. So if we see also, we even have a United Nations. I saw this nice thing. It said that the UN is there, but more flags are appearing. So we have a United Nations, but more and more flags are appearing in different countries. So what's the point? All these different forms of different countries dividing up different places due to differing philosophies and such. And we see that there's also corruption at these highest levels, which prevents a lack of justice. Things like modern slavery, things like terrible invasions to countries, wars occurring over that. And this is a result of poor leadership. We put so much faith in leaders, but we don't actually know how effective they are. How controlled are they? How stable are they? A lot of the times we kind of are blindly raised to just do your thing and vote for someone, or this politician will promise you everything and you'll get them, and then all of a sudden the people become upset when he gets put in office. So this is a result of poor leadership. And I think a common example people think of is, I don't mean to pick names or criticize, but when Bill Clinton was in office, a lot of people were shocked with those things, allegations came out about him. And it's a result of seeing that actually not all of our leaders are actually able to control their mind. So if we have a leader that isn't able to control their mind, it's kind of like the phenomenon of the blind leading the blind. And so we're not actually taking responsibility. We've been conditioned as, again, to kind of not how to think, but what to think. So we're just kind of following down the river as a society. And this is an important aspect. No education on what's called the human defects. So in our ancient knowledge, it talks a lot about this. It's called 4 human defects. So firstly, we have imperfect senses. So there's a whole light spectrum. And just this little part we're able to see. Just this tiny, tiny little part. Even in science, this is all we can see with our own vision. And since we have imperfect senses, this deals with hearing, touching, tasting, smelling as well. We have the tendency to be an illusion. And when we have the tendency to be an illusion, we commit mistakes. And thus we actually end up cheating other people by trying to cover up those mistakes. Even sometimes we just jump right to the cheating others part. I know in my time in life, I've definitely had my fair share of doing these things. So if you feel like you've done this before, you're not alone. We're actually all a part of this. So jumping into the next, which is called Adidaivika Klesha. So natural disasters occur very often. We have hurricanes in the fall season, tornadoes in Oklahoma, places as such. Excuse me. Hurricane Katrina estimated damage up to $145 billion. People are still being impacted by that today. In 2004, there was a tsunami in Indonesia that took out about 150,000 living entities and millions that were placed out of their homes. So we see that not only are there problems occurring between in my own mind and my body, whether it's disease or anxiety or things as such, I'm also dealing with other things that are coming and bothering me all the time. You and I are fighting because your favorite color is purple and I say, well, my favorite color is blue, and blue has to be the only way. And now we're also having another whole wave of storms and tsunamis and hurricanes coming. What are we to do? I mean, this is like, it's like we're being bewildered. At least I still am sometimes about these things that happen. So we have to work, in a sense, to figure out how can we actually work to solve these issues. And this is a really important part of this. When we're talking about Adidaivika Klesha, we kind of forget that nature is conscious. In our philosophy, it talks a lot about this, that nature doesn't just accept things and roll with the flow. We see Isaac Newton's discussion of his third law of physics, which is for every action there's an opposite and an equal reaction. So we see we have over-industrialization on this planet for a basis of material gain. And we have pollution, we have deforestation. You see here, I found this fascinating. Actually, I didn't even know this, so embarrassing for me. But this middle picture here, this is in the Pacific Ocean. These are this is piles of trash. There's literally islands of trash that are culminating in the ocean. Think about that. That's far out to think about. And they're that big. It's almost the size of the west coast of the USA. And so these things are continuously culminating out of a lack of acknowledgement that we're connected with nature. We have so many times where we're not actually really taught about how connected we are with nature, how fascinating nature really is and how it operates. We see in our normal education system, it's just kind of this, okay, here's what you have to study, and this is the test you have to take at the end of the year, you pass it, you're good to go, right? But there's actually a much deeper meaning to the human form of life than just passing tests and getting our check. Because we see, once again, that we're not satisfied with that. So, unfortunately, we're reaping what this ancient knowledge will call is karma. So, it's the nature of how things work, is that nature is conscious, as I've said. And nature doesn't really pick favorites. This is just the way things are. And we don't necessarily understand the consequences of our actions because we're not necessarily taught anything about that. I guess for me, my parents fortunately taught me treat others the way that you want to be treated. right? So we have some vague conception of it. But we limit that conception only to, human beings, for example. As I said earlier, um, through slaughterhouses, there's so many animals being tortured. And we actually learn to have much more compassion when we take up a certain spiritual practice. And even if you interact with an animal that's like you have a really far experience. I don't know if anyone's had like a really cool experience with like an animal that's in a zoo or like you've been in the wild. You're just like, whoa, this is like incredible. This is like this is a living being. It's like such a weird thing to say, but it's true. These are conscious living entities. They can sense that you're vegetarian. Huh? That's definitely happened. There's actually been times when I've been at temples that are really far out in like the mountains, for example, and it's isolated. Like, there's a beautiful temple in West Virginia that's isolated. It's up in the mountains, and the animals are so friendly there, so friendly. And this is in West Virginia. They do a lot of hunting there and things as such, and they know that this place, that the people that live there are actually, they're not going to harm them. It's fascinating stuff. You see that these entities are actually conscious. And those are also souls. It's not just some material being that's for our own sense gratification. And we also see overcrowding. I mean, take a perfect example with New York City. There's so many people that live here. I remember when I first moved here, or at least the first time I came here, I was like bewildered by how big this place was. So big, so many people in one place. And this leads to different forms of lower standards of living. It's more expensive, lower standards of food. I mean, there's not many farms around in New York City. So we kind of continuously become more and more disconnected with nature. But somehow, some way, we keep building more buildings. We keep building up more cities. But how is this actually functional for our growth as a human being? So it's important for us to really question these things. Okay, well, I'm living here in the city. There's 8 million other people living here, and I haven't been to a park in what, 2 years, maybe. What I do like about New York is Central Park. That's a really cool place, I must say. So they're doing something nice for sure. But in general, we see this whole industrialization of the planet, and it's disconnecting us from nature. And there's actually a book that's called Vitamin N. Um, I used to work in a store that's called Arborware, and we used to sell this book to people. There's a lot of arborists that would climb up and do certain work for trees, sometimes maintaining trees, other times, unfortunately cutting them down. But they were really fascinated by this book because this author talked about how children actually have a deficiency in nature. Who would have thought about that? Having a deficiency in nature, usually it's like you have a deficiency in vitamin C, or you have a deficiency in getting iron in your blood. But we don't talk about deficiencies in nature. We don't talk about personal connection, how important that actually is. We're social creatures. As me, who studied psychology, this talks a lot about that, how we actually thrive off the social interactions with others. What to speak of actually being in a natural climate. You can see many studies where people operate in nature and they go in nature after a long time of being in the city or things like that, and things are actually drastically different. Just their body, their immune system, everything starts to get released and slowed down. So these are very important things. Now you might be wondering, okay, well, you just threw all this stuff on us, and now I'm really upset with the world, and what's the point of even staying in this class? Like, this is all going to continue to happen. These problems are going to continuously exist. But actually, this whole time, I've kind of been misleading you. The fact of the matter is that a problem isn't necessarily just something that's the situation. Because naturally in this material world, those three things are always going to be here. So modern society is trying to solve these problems, not knowing that they're actually always going to be existing. Although we can do our part, it's very important, and that can actually minimize things. So we shouldn't ignore that. I'm not saying to just do whatever you want. That's actually the opposite of what I'm saying. But a week ago, I searched up the definition of problem, and you guys would actually be blown away by what I found. So the first definition I found is a question raised for inquiry, consideration, or solution. an intricate, unsettled question, a source of perplexity, distress, or vexation, difficulty in understanding or accepting. So, what does this actually mean? We see that so many times we see problems as just an external situation. We see that, oh my god, this planet is overheating. There's literally islands of garbage in the ocean. There's battles going on. There's wars. There's religious wars, political wars. There's so many different terrible things happening to other human beings, to other living entities, to other animals. But actually, this shows us that a problem isn't just a scenario in itself. The problem is also what we're viewing, how we're seeing the situation. If you see in quantum physics, quantum mechanics, it actually talks about how our perception creates our reality. So, as we continue to proceed in the human form of life, we're going to get thrown with a whole bunch of things. Like sometimes life will just like walk up to you and just, bam, smack you right in the face, and you're like, whoa, okay, I wasn't expecting that. What am I going to do here? This was like, I have no idea what's going on. So instead of us actually attaching to the situation itself, we can work to be more conscious and take a step back. Be like, okay, well, how am I seeing this situation, right? So my, I guess you could say proposal, is that we can actually solve problems with a change of vision. So many times we're creating policies, we have new movements all the time, all these new leaders, all these new presidents. But actually, as we see in these definitions, problems deal a lot with what is going on internally. So instead of seeing these problems, we can actually gain more knowledge and eradicate that view of just being attached to the problem. If we're in that conscious continuously, oh my god, this is a problem, we have to get rid of all the trash and all these things, but okay, you get rid of all the trash, and what's going to happen? The trash is just going to go back in there. Why? Because nobody's changing their thoughts. Nobody's changing their vision. So if we continue to try and solve a problem, it's like, Ryan, if for example, you just walked out the door and someone came with a sword and slashed you right in your arm. You got a big gash in your arm. Oh my god, Narada Muni Das, I'm really hurting. Here, take a Band-Aid. Right? So instead of trying to solve these things with solutions that are temporary, that won't actually work, we have to do the work. We actually have to work to change our vision of things, change our thoughts, change our patterns of habits of how we're seeing situations. It's said that a sign of intelligence is the ability to look at a situation from all different angles with an equal mind. And then with that discernment, we can actually find what's the proper solution, what's the proper thing to fix these issues. So, as I said, we experience these problems due to a lack of knowledge, because these are always going to be there. So there must be a way to overcome them. Through overcoming them, it's through changing our vision. So we call also a lack of knowledge avidya in Sanskrit, or ignorance. And so as we gain more knowledge, our vision can change. So I wanted to quote this verse. This is from a book that we study. It's an ancient wisdom text from India called the Bhagavad Gita. And so Krishna's talking to Arjuna right now about qualities of someone who's in knowledge. Now, while we're reading this, I want you to actually think about what qualities are we doing in ourselves? What qualities, at least for me, I'm definitely going to meditate on a lot of these. What can we fix within ourselves? And imagine if even 20% of the leaders in our society had all these qualities. Imagine how different things would be. So I'll just start reading. Humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master. So that means trying to approach spiritual knowledge, taking a teacher to help guide you through that knowledge. Especially in spiritual life, we find that it's extremely important to have mentors in our life. It's actually said that, especially when we get in the spiritual platform, it's a much more subtle interaction. It actually becomes more of a relationship of the heart instead of just an external thing. Just like sometimes we have a physics teacher and we learn a lot from him, but there's not really a lot of like other connections. We love physics, but the teacher's like, so what? the same thing. I'm getting the knowledge from him that another teacher would give. But in spiritual life, we get that deeper connection sometimes. Actually, all the time, if we find a bona fide spiritual master. Cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification. So that's like what I was talking about earlier. We're so conditioned to want to always gratify our senses, get the next thing. I saw this video the other day, and it was some artist that's really famous on making kind of paradoxical artwork of society. And he made this video, and it was kind of like the common term we hear of like the rat race. And so it came to a point where the rat was running in, and all of a sudden it turned into like the New York subways, and there was like so many rats like crammed into the subway cart, and he could barely get in, and he came out, and he's walking out, and then he's going up all these escalators. There's all these signs, different signs of companies, and all it's saying is just happiness. All the signs just say happiness. So when we actually learn that these objects don't give us happiness, this is the way that our world is working, and people want to make money naturally. Okay, it's the way it goes. But the way they market it is here. This is actually what makes you happy in life. You buy this. This is how you're gonna feel. But maybe like the first week, it's great. I got a new pair of shoes, and then all of a sudden, I don't see where I'm stepping, and I'm not happy anymore. So this is a nice one to ponder as well. Freedom from entanglement, absence of false ego. So identification, false ego means you're identifying wrongly. So our philosophy is saying that you and I, we're actually the soul, we're not the body. And so we're not the body or the mind. So through these changes of vision and identification, we can be able to view our problems in a different situation instead of just what's happening to my body and my mind. How can I take control? The perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease. Detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest. Now that doesn't mean leave your family. We're not telling you to give up your wife and children. But the nature of things of a yogi is practicing and understanding that these are also spiritual souls. So not just seeing them as a material body, but that they're also a spiritual living entity that's trying to navigate through life and understand spirituality. Even-mindedness amidst pleasant and unpleasant events. That's a nice one to meditate on. Constant and unalloyed devotion to me. This is Krishna speaking. Aspiring to live in a solitary place. Detachment from the general mass of people. So as we said, going against this flow of what society is telling you. I think so many times we see this happen where we get kind of conformed into some way of thinking because everyone else is doing it. But the nature of things is just because a million people are wrong doesn't mean you join them. It's important as human beings to actually use your brain, think critically, right? Ask questions, my God, ask questions. It's the most important part of your life. If someone is telling you that you're not allowed to ask a certain question, then you're in a bad situation. Accepting the importance of self-realization, which is what our ancient knowledge says is the goal of human life, to understand who we really are. What am I doing here? What is my purpose? How can I serve society? There we are. And philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be is ignorance. So when we lack these qualities, we lean more towards a lack of knowledge, and thus we limit our vision and our intelligence to be able to look at a problem and solve it nicely with a proper way of thinking. So vision needs focus. So the way that we're thinking, actually, if we see nowadays in neuroscience, even our thoughts can manipulate the way that our body is perceiving things. A lot of people say mind over body. There's actually yogis in India that will just like bury themselves in ice cold water in the mountains and just sit there, like neck deep, just sitting there meditating. So this is a nature of mind over body. They're able to actually control what they're experiencing through their mind because they know that they're beyond both. So as we continue to change our thoughts with more knowledge, those thoughts lead to actions. So we treat people nicer. Maybe we take up a different diet. Maybe we go out and we actually reach out to that neighbor that's across the street. So as our thoughts and our vision changes, our actions change as well. And as our actions change, we develop other habits. So the more we practice these things, we actually get into a habit of doing them. So we're totally changing the shift of what's going on in our life. And that habit develops our character. That develops who we are, right? What people see us as, how we're behaving, how we're treating other people. And that character actually leads to our destiny. So a lot of times you hear that you decide your own destiny. Nowadays it doesn't really seem like that. It's just kind of like whatever, at least for me, I went to school, buried myself in debt, and now I'm a monk. Who knew? So our vision needs focus, and that focus needs a center. So the question is, what actually is our center stone? If you see this background, I've put it here for a reason. So naturally, as living entities, as souls, we have the ability to expand our loving feelings. When we're children, we eat food, we like it. When we grow up, we actually, my brother didn't get this ice cream bar. Maybe I'll share it with him. And you feel really good afterwards, actually. I don't know if anyone has siblings. I've fought a lot with my siblings, but I've also really had some powerful experiences with my siblings. And it's out of the basis of loving and sharing with each other. Sharing your mind, sharing your food, whatever it is. So, as we continue to grow, we develop more and more affection for different things, whether it's our nationality. People sometimes go and they sacrifice their lives for the people of their country. And then it reaches internationally. We have a desire to want to unite everyone in the world. But the issue is that we actually all don't have the center of focus. We all don't have the same center of focus. So what happens is, I have my center and I throw it in the pond. And that center creates a circle of waves, 360 degrees. Those waves are emanating and expanding. But the issue is that when someone takes another stone and throws it in a different way, in a different center, then those waves start creating dissonance. And they overlap. So the purpose of this change of vision is actually finding common ground with everyone. When we find common ground with everyone, then we can actually work to cooperate with them properly. Otherwise, it's just like kind of sentimental and fake. So modern leaders nowadays and our experts and problem solvers, unfortunately, don't really have that center that's simultaneously, or you could say synonymous. So they all have different centers and different ideas, different motives, material desires, I want the power, whatever it is. Even if it's not something that's about power, greed, or lust, it's still not actually matching the center. So thus, they're lacking perfect knowledge. So what is perfect knowledge? Perfect knowledge is when we actually understand the supreme center of existence. This is what is called Krishna consciousness. So this is what we share, God consciousness. And through this process, you develop what's called Bhakti. So Bhakti yoga is a practice of yoga, which pretty much means loving devotional service. As we said earlier, it feels really good to share things with other people. The coolest thing about Bhakti yoga is that in a spiritual process, when you share, you actually get more. You don't lose anything. For example, if Mario came up to me and said, hey, I need $10, like I'm really hungry. Ryan, do you have anything? Right? We don't want to give up these things. But when we're actually experiencing things of spiritual realization, spiritual knowledge, spiritual feeling, loving feelings in that spiritual plane, then it's unlimited. There's no barrier. There's no end to it. So if everyone had these same center stones, you see how the center stones are stacked. Not only are they stacked in the same place and these waves are emanating from that same place, there's no dissonance, there's no overlapping of the waves. You can draw as many circles as you want around these circles and nothing will overlap. So, imagine if all of our leaders had this idea, how can I serve this supreme center that we all share? How can I find this common ground, whether I'm at a United Nations meeting or there's a treaty for war, right? All these different things. How can I actually find that center properly and how can we maintain this? So, what happens when Krishna is put in the center? What happens when Krishna consciousness is actually put in the center and these other things are emanating from it? So, our understanding, what our ancient texts will tell us, is that actually Krishna is the source of all loving feelings. Krishna is the source of all knowledge, all fame, all beauty, all renunciation, all these things. So when we're actually, as us being naturally part and parcel of that Supreme Center, we become spiritualized by being conscious of that, by acting in that consciousness, by acting as a desire to serve that Supreme Center. And everything, then we can actually unlimitedly expand our loving feelings continuously without any overlapping. It's kind of like this example that I put here as an iron rod in fire. If you've ever seen videos, they will put like iron in a fire and it'll stay there for a while and it'll get really, really red hot and it actually turns into fire itself. But then you take it out and it cools off and it becomes iron again. So another kind of motivation that not only I'm saying for myself but for all of us here is to stay in that fire. Stay in that fire of wanting to serve and help other people. Stay in that fire of wanting to help this Supreme Center of existence. Because naturally, if we take care of that center of existence, then everything will expand the way it needs to be. Nowadays, we're kind of watering the branches and leaves of the tree. And we're doing it really elaborately, actually. We're doing a really good job. But actually, the tree isn't getting properly nourished. Why? Because it belongs to go to the root. When you water the root of the tree, everything actually naturally becomes nourished. So, as I said, if we all understand that we're part and parcel of this, then we can actually come to understandings of respectful disagreement. You see, nowadays in society, it's like disagreement is like the worst thing in the world. You know, it's like, oh my God, you don't agree with my take on this, policy that was just made by the Democrats or the Republicans. Like, I can't hang out with you. I've actually seen it firsthand. I've seen friendships and relationships get destroyed simply by some political view. That's how strong it is. So when we keep Krishna in the center, we actually naturally have more love for everyone because we see us as actually, we're all connected to that Supreme Center. So if we're all connected to that Supreme Center, then we can actually find a common ground. Okay, well, your viewpoint might be really crazy, but I still accept you. It's this process of actually seeing someone as a spiritual being, not seeing them as their mind and their material body. And we also become more capable of tolerating situations, all these problems that we're experiencing. That mosquito that keeps buzzing around your ear, it's really annoying. Yeah. But when we actually learn to tolerate these things, we can become more aware of our connection with these certain issues. How am I viewing this situation? Oh my God, I just got in a car crash, my life, my day is ruined, everything's over. But hey, there's actually that book that's been sitting in my car. So maybe I can start reading it. So we can work to actually transmutate our problems into opportunities. As we see here, we can actually turn these situations into windows of transformation. It's actually kind of what happens if you've heard the saying that pressure makes diamonds. So all of our problems, when we have a spiritual vision of things, when we're keeping Krishna consciousness, we're keeping Krishna for the Supreme Center of existence in that center, then actually these problems will morph into opportunities. We'll see it and it's actually experienced. It's not just something that I'm telling you. So these two last things in this slide are simple living, high thinking. So my challenge for you is don't go for the temporary material things because this actually it's not going to bring you satisfaction. It's not going to bring you happiness. It might bring you temporary happiness. That's actually the point of it. That's why you buy a Coca-Cola and it tastes great, and then all of a sudden you want another one. And then you drink like 20 of them, and you're like, oh my God, I'm never drinking Coca-Cola again. Right? So we have to dive deeper. When we dive deeper, we can actually find a deeper satisfaction. It's called ananda, or bliss. We get a higher taste of things. And naturally we drop our taste for other things. So another is unity and diversity. If we have that same center, you see all these stones here in the background that are stacked. But every stone is totally different. But they're maintaining that center. So we're all individual souls and living beings, but we're all also extremely connected with each other. And we're all also extremely similar. So if we work to actually address these deeper qualities, then society in general will see a massive improvement. Massive improvement. I couldn't imagine if, as I was saying, at least 20% of our leaders had at least some conception of this, that we're not the body, that there's something higher beyond this body, beyond death, beyond birth, time. So, my final request for you is to become a Mahatma. Chant Hare Krishna. Mahatma In Sanskrit, Maha means great and Atma means soul or self. So in this age of Kali Yuga, I'll give you a little description. So if you see in any ancient civilization, they have these calendars, and they actually give different cycles of consciousness of ages within these calendars, whether it's astrology, whether it's a Mayan calendar. In this ancient knowledge from India, it also talks about these things. And so in this age, it's called Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is an age of ignorance and hypocrisy and fighting and conflict. So we can't necessarily do the same types of meditation that were in different ages where things were more peaceful. So we've been given what's called the Maha Mantra, or chanting, mantra meditation. So if you see this mantra up here, maybe we can all say it together. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, by naturally chanting, we actually naturally develop these qualities that we were talking about earlier: humility, pridelessness, tolerance, a desire for knowledge, for spiritual knowledge, self-realization, right? Because we're actually cleaning out these things that are covering who we really are. It's getting rid of the nature of who we really are. So these material things are more and more clouding and covering the heart. And so when we work on chanting, we're chanting attentively, we're trying to connect, then actually these things become clean and we become more clear. Our vision changes totally. And that's what happens. The problems become solved. It's not that the problems won't exist, but it's that actually the way that you're viewing the problems will change. And thus you can solve these issues much nicer. So through the process of chanting, we naturally develop these qualities of a Mahatma, or one who's actually capable of expanding their loving feelings by maintaining their center. Maintaining that service, the supreme center of existence, will actually maintain not only us and help us grow, but also maintain all other living entities. We're helping everyone by benefiting ourselves. And by benefiting, or by helping others, we're also benefiting ourselves. So that's about all I have. Thank you for being so patient and tolerant for me giving a class, and we can open up to questions now. And
you mentioned that the material sort of instant gratification desires are lesser than spiritual growth. Does that mean we shouldn't pursue these material desires whatsoever?
That's a really good question, actually. The nature of things is that through this spiritual process, we naturally get a higher taste. So I'm not going to tell you to give up your school or give up your desires to do things in the world. I'm telling you to add chanting, to add spiritual life to what you're doing. There's actually a nice saying where you have a bottle of ink. If you dump out that bottle of ink, there's still ink that's going to be in there. It won't be able to come out. But if you take like a denser substance like milk and you dump it in there, actually naturally the density of milk is more dense than ink and it floods out those things naturally. So through the process of spiritual practices, we naturally get a higher taste for things. There's so many stories in an ancient book called the Bhagavad Purana. It's from ancient India. And it talks about these devotees of Krishna who had material desires. And they actually they carried on in their life with those material desires. But they also were practicing spirituality. And eventually they came to a point where they didn't need those things anymore. So it's a gradual process. It's not that we're bad people for having material desires. It's natural. We all have different psychophysical natures. Like, I used to love playing sports. I used to love skateboarding and playing live music, right? Not that I don't like those things anymore. But the more that we pick up a spiritual practice, we can actually dovetail it into whatever we're doing, especially if we have a really intense longing for it, intense things. So Bhakti can be added to anything that we do. So you're a businessman or you're a therapist, all these things, Bhakti can be added into whatever we're doing. Because it's about the consciousness that we're operating in. I'm not sure if that helps. But, okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, reflections? The floor is open if you'd like to share anything. Okay. What we're going to do is, I guess we can do a little more kirtan. I'll keep this open actually because I really like this picture. See, this is the nature of the material world. Right? Oh, that's nice. Okay, well, I guess the picture will stay down. But anyways, thank you for your time. Now we're gonna do a little bit of mantra meditation. So we were doing kirtan for a little bit.